guys, welcome back to the homestead. So today we're actually going to try something different. I was looking for a recipe over the weekend because I was trying to start something new and I wanted to kind of switch up the meal routine a little bit, and I kept going through recipe after recipe after recipe, and it would be easy this, quick that, and you would get into it and you'd read through it and like, this is not easy at all. So I actually thought about, we're going to test a couple of these. It's going to be kind of a series that I'm going to do. Well, we're going to get a recipe, random recipe offline, where it says, you know, simple bread or quick bread or easy bread, and see if that process actually holds up. And I'm going to print it off. I've never made this before. I have made bread before, but I've never made this recipe before. I had to go ahead and do a little pre-work up in advance, just so everything's in the camera. But for the most part, it says that the entire process is going to take us 2 hours and 35 minutes. Well, we can easily see this is not quick bread, but it says it's simple homemade sandwich bread. If the recipe turns out really good, then I'll put the link down below for you guys to try it yourself, but I would not recommend anything that ends up turning out to be a total disaster, and this totally could. So it first calls for 2 cups of whole milk, a cup of water, half a cup of butter, 8 cups of bread flour, 6 tablespoons of honey and or sugar, whichever your preference is, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 9 teaspoons of yeast activated. So with this process, it said put all the dry ingredients together. I need to grab my salt. And so said put all the dry ingredients in the bowl together. So we start reading, and this is the best part of the entire thing. So it says, in a large glass mixing bowl, add milk, water, and cubed butter. Heat in the microwave or a saucepan. I went with the saucepan method until warm but not boiling. The butter will melt, but there should be some solid piece for floating. Temperature needs to be about 110 degrees. So if you don't have a thermometer, right, just an easy, simple thermometer, well, you're not going to know what 110 degrees is. And I guess you could look by the chunks, but it's really easy to kill your yeast. The temperature's too warm, and it's just not going to survive. So, so then it continues on. It says, in your mixer, right, combine all your ingredients, all your dry ingredients except for flour. Now, here's where my biggest issue is. If you've opted for honey, would you consider that a dry ingredient or a wet ingredient? Because it didn't tell you to put it in with the wet, right? So this is where you would have to know that you would need to put your honey probably in with your wet, not with your dry, because otherwise your honey would lump all up in there. I opted to throw it in my wet. And so then it says put all of them in the mixer. So let's just go ahead. We've got all our dry in the mixer. My mixer never wants to stay, and because of my setup, it likes to shake the whole freaking table. But so it says mix the ingredients together. So we're just going to start this out on stir. That way everything kind of mixes up. And again, this is just our dry ingredients mixing right now. Now here's another thing too. So it tells you to melt. It says add the milk, water, and cubed butter to a saucepan. And it says the temperature needs to be warm enough to activate yeast. Nowhere in here does it ever tell you to add the yeast, right? So if you're new to this and you've never made bread before, you could possibly forget to add your yeast because there's no step in here that says add yeast. So I went ahead and added my yeast to my warm mixture because through a process of elimination, since it said, aim for 110 degrees so we don't kill the yeast, well, by logic, we know the yeast goes in here. But again, if you're looking for a step-by-step and you've never made bread before, like I can get, if you've been in the bread world for a while, you know that you need yeast. But if you've never done it before, you don't know, right? So you could definitely miss that step. So we're going to add the yeast in here. And then it says, while you're stirring, to slowly pour your wet mixture in. My lock didn't lock again. It really just does not like this bowl for some reason. Yeah, it does not like this bowl. Step 1, get a better mixer. Alright, try it that way. But one, my flow is making a mess. Alright, it says while it's doing this, we had to set a cup of flour aside. So out of the total, 8 cups of bread flour we had, we started with 7 cups in here. And then it says to slowly sprinkle this back in until all the dough comes off of the edges. It says while the dough is kneading, take a cup of water and bring it to boil in the microwave and leave the door shut to create a humid area for proofing. Now, I have a microwave because my children use the microwave, but I'm not a fan of the microwave. Also, I wouldn't put any food I wanted to eat in that microwave because my kids let things explode when they're using it. So what I did was I pre-boiled a large pot of water and I've stuck it in my oven to make my oven a nice humid place to put this dough to kind of recreate what she's got going on here. And so that's been going for long enough, and it says now we're going to transfer the dough to a lightly greased mixing bowl and cover the bowl with a loose tea towel. No, it doesn't want to come out. I have a love-hate relationship with my mixer. That's some flaky, dry dough. Okay, like I said, I've already got my oven warmed up, so I'm going to stick this in there. And it says that we need to let it sit in there for 45 minutes to an hour. I can already tell you, if I didn't know how to make bread, I'd probably be a little frustrated with this recipe. So we might not be linking below. Unless flavor trumps process, maybe. If it ends up turning to be very decently flavored, it might actually trump it. But so that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to let that sit in there for 45 minutes. Then we'll come back and we'll continue with this process. But so far, this has been interesting. So it's been 45 minutes now, and we've got a pretty decent rise, to say the least. And now the next part in our instructions are to take this and turn this on a lightly floured surface. I'll try to get it out of the bowl. She's a happy loaf. All right, now we're going to take her. Well, that's really dry in there. That should be fun to see how that works out. So this is supposed to make 2 loaves. We don't want to overwork our dough. Just want to cover it well. We're going to find about a good halfway mark. And then it says shape it into a loaf. And then we're going to put it in a lightly greased bread pan. Now, if you've put a pot of water in your stove to make it where it will be warmer for your dough to rise in there instead of using the microwave, make sure you take your pot out, because I push mine all the way to the back. So just make sure you take your pot out. Sad when we kill a pot unintentionally. We're just making a loaf shape, not trying to make them pretty. Make a loaf shape. Made a loaf shape. All right, for this part, it says just put them in and cover them with a towel. And so that's what we're going to do. And it says we're going to let them rise for 20 to 30 minutes or until they are bubbling out of the pan. So just cover them with a light. I use these flour bag towels. I'm probably obsessed with them. I have probably way too many of them. But we're just going to cover this with a towel and go for a second rise, like they said, 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how soon before it puffs up out of the tin. So I'm going to go and work on some other stuff while this is doing this, and then we'll come back. Okay, guys, so it's been about, I'd say about 25 minutes. These have risen very nicely in the pan. So our next step for our instructions is to take some melted butter, which I'd usually just put it in a measuring cup at the back of the stove. And while the oven's preheating, it does a nice job of melting my butter for me. And then it says to take this butter and just lightly brush it on our bread. All right. So we've got that on. And then it says from there, we're going to take it and put it in the oven, a preheated 350 degree oven. We're going to put it in there for 55 minutes or until the tops are golden brown and the sides are firm. And it says, I think, an internal temperature of 165. So we'll put those in there. I'll set my timer for 55 minutes. And then we'll come back. Okay, guys, we're back. These have sat and cooled. I think they turned out pretty nice from the outside appearance. So I'm going to actually, one of them actually turned out a lot prettier than the other one. So I'm going to cut the quote unquote ugly one to start with. But it looks like we've got a nice firm crust on the outside, and it appears to be soft too. So let us cut in with our knife. So that looks like it turned out pretty nice too. So what we're going for is like a sandwich bread, and it's soft on the inside. So we want to cut like, I mean, you can cut it how you want to. It's your bread, but for my purposes, I'm going to cut it like a piece of sandwich bread. So yeah, very soft on the inside. And of course, most importantly, see how this tastes. I mean, bread without butter, what is it? Apparently the cat wants some. It's actually pretty good. So, with a few hiccups that we had with where we're supposed to put our yeast, and if we're putting our honey in with our liquids, or if we're putting, sugar, of course, would go with the dry. I think all in all, this worked out really well. The whole point of this series is not to really bash anybody. I just noticed, like, over the weekend, like, people really draw you in with this is quick, this is simple, this is easy. And considering I work full time, I have a business part time, and I do this as well, I really need quick, simple, and easy sometimes when I'm trying to learn a new process. And then I can kind of take it and make it my own. And that's kind of the whole point of this. Is it really easy? Was this easy? So like I was saying before my mic died, so this is actually very easy, very simple. So, I mean, all in all, I definitely would recommend it if you're trying to look for some sandwich bread that's straightforward to make. I'm going to put the link below. I hope you enjoyed coming by and trying this with me. I think the first run was a success. I have other things I want to try, so more to come.